On a cold October night, Daniel Whitmore did something he thought was small. He gave away his last $12 to a stranger. But that act of kindness pulled him into a mystery he would never forget. Because sometimes the scariest stories don't start with shadows. They start with kindness. The rain that evening came down hard, blurring the glow of the street lamps into sickly halos. The air smelled of wet asphalt and smoke from distant chimneys. Daniel locked up his tiny grocery shop and sighed, staring at the dim aisles through the window. Shelves were nearly bare, the hum of the old refrigerator the only sound. His store, his livelihood, was dying, and with it, his hope. He turned down Willow Street, collar up against the rain, when he nearly tripped. Under the awning of a closed bakery sat a man, hunched forward, water dripping from his hood. His army jacket was tattered, his boots cracked. At his feet lay a cardboard sign, its words smudged but clear. Hungry. Cold. Anything helps. Daniel's gut tightened. He wanted to walk faster, to pass by, to pretend he hadn't seen him. But then the man's head lifted, and Daniel froze. Eyes stared back at him, pale, unblinking, like they belonged to someone who had walked through hell and hadn't fully returned. The silence between them pressed heavy. Daniel cleared his throat. Cold night. The man's lips cracked into speech. His voice was low, hoarse. Colder than I expected. Daniel hesitated. Have you eaten? The man gave a single, hollow shake of his head. Daniel had $12 in his pocket, his dinner money, his last bit of comfort in a life slowly collapsing. Yet, walking away felt impossible. His voice surprised him. Wait here. I'll be back, and the bakery's warmth nearly undid him. The smell of fresh bread made his stomach twist. But he bought 2 sandwiches, handing over nearly everything he had left. When he returned, he held one out. The man stared, as if unsure it was real. For me? Daniel nodded. Yeah, and one for me. Thought we could share. The man smiled faintly. I'm Eli. Daniel. They ate in silence, rain whispering against the awning. Eli spoke in fragments, of military service, of coming home to nothing, of years drifting like a ghost. But his words carried something unspoken, something darker, as if he was holding back truths too heavy to share. When Eli stood to leave, Daniel found himself saying, Come by my store tomorrow. I might have work. Eli's pale eyes lingered on him, unreadable. Then he nodded. The next morning, Daniel almost regretted his offer. His store was too fragile, too close to closing. But at exactly 10 o'clock, the bell jingled. Eli stepped inside, cleaner now, straighter. But his eyes, they held that same unsettling calm. Ready to work, Eli said. And he did. Harder than anyone Daniel had ever hired. Shelves filled neatly, floors shone. Customers lingered longer, pulled in by his quiet politeness. Business improved. The shop felt alive. Yet, Daniel couldn't ignore the whispers. Some customers said Eli gave them chills. Others said he seemed too calm. Sometimes, late at night, Daniel caught Eli staring out the window long after closing, watching the street like he was waiting for something. Weeks passed. Eli became part of the store. He worked tirelessly, almost unnaturally so. He never complained, never asked for more. He slept in the storeroom on a thin cot without protest, as if comfort no longer meant anything to him. But Daniel noticed things. Sometimes when he entered the shop early in the morning, he found Eli already awake, standing in the shadows near the window, staring out at the street as though waiting for someone. He'd speak softly, almost to himself, then fall silent the moment Daniel approached. At night, the strangeness deepened. Daniel would lie awake, the creak of the building shifting in the wind, when he heard Eli muttering in his sleep. Names Daniel didn't recognize, places he'd never heard of. The words tumbled together in broken fragments, and more than once Daniel heard tones that didn't even sound like English. Other times, Eli jolted awake with a sharp inhale, sitting upright, eyes wide and scanning the dark corners of the storeroom as if he expected something, or someone, to be there. Once, during a thunderstorm so loud it rattled the window panes, Daniel swore he heard Eli whisper, "It always comes back." Always. The word sent a shiver crawling across Daniel's skin. He wanted to ask what Eli meant, but the question died in his throat, because some part of him already feared the answer. Still, life with Eli had a strange rhythm. The shop began to feel alive again. Customers stayed longer, drawn to Eli's quiet efficiency, though a few admitted to Daniel that they didn't trust him. Too calm, they said. Too cold. Daniel defended him, though doubts tugged at him in the quiet hours. Because when Eli looked at him with those pale, unreadable eyes, Daniel sometimes felt like he was the stranger in his own store. The weather turned colder. Storms grew harsher, and each time the rain hammered the windows, Daniel saw Eli pause, listening, as if the sound carried something only he could hear. And Daniel, though he never admitted it, found himself listening too. Then came the robbery. The storm outside was brutal, hammering the windows like fists, lightning splitting the sky. Daniel sat at the counter, bills spread in front of him, the register drawer half open. He was lost in thought when the door slammed open. A man in a hood burst inside. Rain ran down his clothes in streams, pooling on the floor. His hand jammed into his pocket, pressing against the fabric, sharp enough to be a weapon. "Cash!" the man barked, his voice jagged and desperate. "All of it. Now." Daniel froze. His chest tightened. The storm seemed to vanish behind the roar of his heartbeat. But before he could move, Eli stepped forward. Not frantic, not afraid, calm. "You don't want to do this," Eli said. His voice was steady, unnervingly certain, every word carrying a weight that filled the room. The hooded man's head snapped toward him. "Move, or I'll—" But Eli didn't move. His eyes locked on the intruders, unblinking, cold, almost inhuman in their stillness. Seconds dragged. The only sound was the thunder outside and the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. He wanted to shout, to beg, to do anything to end the standoff. But something about Eli's presence rooted him to silence. The robber's breath grew ragged, his hand trembled, his voice cracked. I mean it." Eli's gaze never wavered. His voice came again, lower, heavier. "No, you don't," the man broke. With a curse, he spun on his heel and fled into the storm, vanishing into the night. Daniel collapsed into his chair, chest heaving. His hands shook as he tried to close the register. You could have been killed," he whispered, his voice cracking. Eli turned slowly, his lips curved into that faint, unsettling smile. "Not tonight. Not here." Word spread quickly. By morning, whispers had already begun. Neighbors spoke of the quiet man who had stared danger down without flinching. Customers returned, eager to catch a glimpse of him, to see the man who had stopped a robbery without raising his voice. Business thrived. Sales climbed. Daniel's debts began to shrink. For the first time in months, he breathed easier. But unease lingered, because Eli never explained that night. When pressed, he said only, "Some men fight, some men run." I knew which kind he was. Daniel never asked how. Rumors spread too. Some said Eli had been a soldier so hardened by war that nothing could shake him. Others whispered that he had stared too long into something darker, and that whatever had stared back had never truly left him. Daniel tried to ignore the talk, but the way Eli stood at the window some nights, watching the dark street, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the lamps outside, Daniel couldn't silence the feeling that Eli was waiting. For what? He didn't dare ask. One evening, Eli entered the office carrying an envelope. He placed it gently on the desk. Inside was a letter of acceptance into a veterans program, a chance to rebuild his life. "I wouldn't be here without you," Eli said softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, Eli. You saved me." The two men embraced. For a moment, Daniel felt the warmth of friendship, of gratitude. But when Eli stepped into the rain, Daniel caught one last glimpse of his pale eyes. Calm, knowing, unreadable. And in the silence that followed, a thought burrowed deep into his chest. Had he truly saved a broken man in need of kindness? Or had kindness drawn something stranger into his life that night? Even now, whenever the storms return and Willow Street lies slick with rain, Daniel listens to the whisper outside his window and wonders, did Eli save him from poverty? Or from something he never saw at all? Something that might still be out there, waiting in the dark,